Hey, everybody. The 49ers coming off a big win against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers yesterday, 35-7. It was a win that didn't come without some issues as there were some big injuries for the 49ers. We're going to get into all of those. We'll talk about whether or not the 49ers can get by without Deebo Samuel for the remainder of the regular season and much more on tonight's Hammerhead Show. Hey everybody, how you doing? This is Jack Hammer of the Santa Rosa Press Democrat, and with me as always for the Hammerhead Show, I've got Rob Schuh here. Rob, how you doing?
You know, I'm doing a hell of a lot better after that game yesterday. Niners riding the 6-game win streak. I'm all about it, Jack.
6-game win streak. It's been since what, 2019 since we've been able to say that. Now the team's at 9-4, and even more important, they're going into Seattle on Thursday night with a chance to win the division. What?
Yes, take home the NFC West from Seattle, bring it back down. I mean, that would be fantastic. There is a little bit of pause for me that back in 2019, you mentioned it, that was the last time we had a win streak of this magnitude where we got to 8 in a row, and it was the dreaded Seattle Seahawks that ended that streak. So we got to make sure that doesn't happen this time around.
That's right. It was the Seattle Seahawks on a Monday night game at Levi Stadium. The
overtime.
In overtime, that's the Chase McLaughlin game where he kicks it into the tunnel, missed wide left into the tunnel of all places. So yeah, that was a bad one. But no, we got to focus on this positivity of what we just saw yesterday, 35-7. I mean, that's just exactly what you and I drew up the night before when we were talking about this game on Friday, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there were people in the comments section saying it was going to be a low-scoring defensive affair, but you and I were very clear about our opinion that no, the Niners were going to blow out the Bucs from the outset.
Man, it was definitely a surprise the way that whole game went down, and we'll get into it in much more detail, but really quick. First off, wanted to shout out a bunch of folks over there. We have a lot of people in the comment section. I want to shout them out. We have Raphael 5629ers. He's a member of the Toolbox. He says, "Good evening, Jack, Rob, members of the Toolbox, and everyone." And then he always does the good deed and reminds everybody to like and subscribe. Then we have the big Luke Walsh over here. He says, "It's the Jack and Rob show." We have Palo Alto Niners says, "Two really good dudes." You got to put that one up because he's been nice to us.
Yes, then we have from Palo Alto. Cheers.
There you go. Palo Alto guy, the Stanford Cardinal, just getting a new head coach today. Troy Taylor from Sac State, former Cal guy. That's interesting. Cal quarterback becomes the head coach at Stanford. Didn't something like that happen before with these two teams where I think it was the other way around? I could be wrong. Jack Hammer, Rob Schuh, happy Monday. We got Stunna in here. We have Sean 9519ers. Jack, I told you 31-6. You laughed at me. Asked if I was serious. Sean, I'm never going to dot you again. That was you were on the money with that one.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. We got Antonio Natal, Raphael 569ers again. We got Big Greg T in the house. He said thumbs ups to Rob and Jack. We've got Foy Daniels, George Soares, Spy Nick Danger, and there is the crew getting ready to discuss this game. 49ers injury report came out. That was a little bit of a somber note yesterday. The Deebo Samuel news, and then we have Brock Purdy with an injury as well. It was not a good day for the 49ers overall. So you look at their practice participation report. Let's just go off of that. It's a little bit easier to do it that way. Kevin Givens, he did not practice. He's out. Obviously, he hurt his knee yesterday, so he's going to be out for a while. Deebo Samuel. The nice piece about that Deebo Samuel news, it's not as bad as I think we all feared. We all thought, at least when they carted him off, I thought it was his knee. Then they hear it's the ankle. Now today, here it's a little bit of the ankle and the knee. So not good news on Deebo Samuel there. Samuel Womack has already been ruled out for this week because he is in the concussion protocol. Just not enough time to turn that around. Kerry Hyder Jr. has an ankle injury, and Brock Purdy with an oblique. and then Ambry Thomas came out of the game with an ankle as well. So when you look at it, though, the injuries as far as guys who won't be able to play or didn't practice today from the game, Kevin Givens with that knee, Deebo Samuel, and Sam Womack, those are the three that wouldn't have, they didn't practice anyway, but they wouldn't have been able to practice if they did practice. I wanted to ask you, Rob, what's your take on what's going on with Deebo Samuel here? I've heard, maybe you can tell me a little bit more, but I've heard that there's even a possibility he's going to be back before the end of the regular season.
That's the rumor that's flying around on Twitter today, is that Deebo Samuel's injury is not quite as bad as anyone had thought. And certainly the look to everyone watching, myself included, was that felt like a season ender, the way in which Deebo got emotional afterwards. I mean, it is a miracle in my book that we're talking about the fact that he may come back. It sounds as if, in the way in which the news has shifted, that maybe it was the ankle that was more of the concern there. But with the MCL, oftentimes those are 4+ week injuries. We only have 4 games remaining, and there's certainly talk of him making it back in the regular season, which leads me to believe that it is a less than severe knee injury and not the high ankle sprain, which again would be in that 4 to 6 week range.
Yeah, I'm really interested in the fact that they're saying that he could be back for the regular season, because we've seen a number of guys for the 49ers this year dealing with MCL injuries. Elijah Mitchell is on his second one of the season. One of the linebackers was dealing with it earlier as well, and those were both 6 week plus injuries. And so that Deebo Samuel with an MCL strain along with the high ankle sprain, I believe it is, the fact that they think they can get him back before the end of the regular season at Levi's Stadium, I think it's going to be the 8th of January, 4 weeks away. That's a very interesting news to me.
It really is. It would seem like as the 49ers get down the road, that if you don't need Deebo Samuel to come back, that you might, in fact, allow him the extra time to rest if you're headed for the playoffs anyway, and you're not worried about seeding. But with Minnesota faltering just a little bit, the Niners might have their eyes set on that number 2 seed.
Yeah, and it's right in front of them. They're only a couple of games back now. We have Sean 951 says Deebo will come back when the 49ers need him back. We will see him in the playoffs. Don't need him the next 4 weeks. Wrap up the division Thursday. And that was really the topic of the show, and we'll get into it right now, and we'll get into our observations from the game. But how are the 49ers going to be able to get through this time? Or do you think that they're going to be able to make it through without Deebo Samuel?
If it had been any other season last year in particular, Deebo Samuel goes down, you would say to yourself that that's a huge blow for the 49ers offense, one that they probably can't overcome. The defense would need to step it up. You would need to have some big plays on special teams. Everyone around the team would have to step it up in order to win. And now with the offense the way that it is, assuming that Brock Purdy is able to go and we're not down to our 4th string quarterback, I do think that the 49ers can overcome this. I actually am a little bit more concerned at how the Niners seem to be stacking up injuries at specific positions. The accumulation of minor injuries, thankfully, guys are coming back. Kinlaw might start to practice after the game in Seattle, the last game on turf. But at interior defensive line, that feels like it's stacking up. Cornerbacks with Dante Johnson going out there and unfortunately blowing out his knee during the game. And then you have Ambry Thomas nicked up. Diamador Lenore is definitely out because of Samuel Womack definitely out because of that concussion protocol. So those ones are more concerning. With Deebo, yes, he's a huge piece to this offense. Yes, he is a huge value to the 49ers. And when I look at the way in which we've been spreading the ball around to the rest of the playmakers, the addition of Christian McCaffrey to me added the 1A and 1B, whether you want to put Deebo at 1A or McCaffrey at 1A. They are somewhat interchangeable and incredible weapons in and of themselves. So you can lean heavier on Christian McCaffrey and get the ball to George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, Juszczyk, players that haven't been getting just as many looks but are available. Jawan Jennings can step it up. We've seen Ray McLeod making the occasional play. And hell, even Danny Gray got his first catch of his NFL career. So it feels as though with a distributor at quarterback, we can move the ball around and overcome the loss of Deebo. Clearly, it is a blow to the offense. But yes, I do think the 49ers will be able to get by without him in this remaining schedule.
Yeah, for me, I think that they can. I go back for me. I go back to the game against the Rams. I understand that they have some teams on their schedule maybe a little bit better than the Rams in terms of who they're going up against in Seattle and Washington. And well, Seattle and Washington, the other two teams aren't better than the Rams. The
Right.
Arizona Cardinals are not a good football team, and the Las Vegas Raiders just got beat by a quarterback who showed up 2 days before the game. So when you look at it, I think the 49ers, when you look back to that Rams game, Christian McCaffrey and what they were able to do there, he kind of gives them a little bit of buffer. As long as he's healthy, I think they'll be okay there. And then in terms of who replaces Deebo Samuel, I think you're gonna. This is the time now for Ray-Ray McCloud to step up, and he has his opportunity now to step up and make some plays. You saw it a little bit on in the game yesterday. I saw it during preseason. Remember, Deebo wasn't there throughout the offseason program until
Right.
a couple days into training camp, and throughout all that period, it was Ray-Ray McCloud that was getting all of those reps. He was basically Deebo Samuel for the offseason. In terms of what they were asking him to do. So, and you saw him step right into that position yesterday with 3 carries and a nice catch. So, I think they'll be able to get by. I think they have the talent there as long as Brock Purdy's oblique injury isn't too bad.
Yeah, absolutely. That feels like the bigger question mark there. When you think of Ray replacing Deebo, is that really one player, 1-for-1, or are we talking Deebo light? From what you saw in the preseason, what Ray was able to do, obviously we saw a few carries there, and I thought that it looked good. It didn't necessarily present a mirror image at all of what Deebo is able to do with the talent he has, but do you see it as a capable fill-in there?
They don't have a receiver that runs the ball like Deebo does. So,
Right.
the closest they have there is Christian McCaffrey. So he's not going to give them necessarily a guy that's going to take it to the house, but he can do a lot of those same things. And we know, I think from a receiving standpoint, he can be just as good as Deebo Samuel as a receiver. I think not necessarily after the ball is in his hands, but getting to the catch point, making the catch, and those types of things. He's just not the yak, guy that's going to catch a 1-yard screen and take it 90, 75 yards like
Right.
he did in a couple of
He
times.
doesn't have the lower body strength that Deebo has to just truck through people.
Yeah, nobody on the 49ers does. I mean, Brandon Ayuk is probably their best wide receiver, but he doesn't have that type of playmaking ability either in that position. And we'll see. I think in some ways this might, I hate to say this because Deebo Samuel is very important to the 49ers, but it might actually help them to get a little more focused on what they're doing. Might be a little bit of a struggle because of the short turnaround for Thursday night, but it might help them out against Washington and so on, because it seemed to me that's what happened against the Rams.
You think Shanahan might begin to figure out the way in which he distributes the ball amongst the remaining playmakers?
Yeah, because instead you saw a really good 1-2 combination at running back between Christian McCaffrey and it was Jeff Wilson. At that point, it's going to be Jordan Mason, I think, this week. So I think you're going to get a good 1-2 combination there at the running back spot. And I'm really interested to see how, if they get back to working Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle off of one another, that's really worked so well for them against the Rams. And I think that works right in the wheelhouse of what you get out of Brock Purdy as well. I think that it's a deal that they can get through. I think they can make it work, and it's going to be a tough one. This game up in Seattle isn't like going to Los Angeles, though.
No, it's going to be a tough one. Let me ask you an off-the-cuff fantasy football question, because I've got, the playoffs coming up here, Jack, and this is important. But Jordan Mason, we're coming into a short week. Christian McCaffrey has now been on the injury report, right? Has had some nagging injuries, nothing serious, but he's getting nicked up. Clearly has been used a fair amount to this point. Do you see this? And let me add in there that people are talking about every now and again, they mention Marshawn Lynch when they talk about Jordan Mason. So it kind of feels like if you've got a mini Marshawn Lynch early in his career and you're going into Seattle, what better place to unleash him on a short week where you need to balance carries with Christian McCaffrey? We've seen a steady climb in Jordan Mason's carries, up from 8 to 11 this past week. Does he top 11 carries? Can he get to 14 or 15 where he is fantasy football relevant, Jack?
I think the only way he gets above that number is if it's a situation like what they had this week where they're blowing a team out. I don't think he would have got 14 carries if
You're
that was
right.
a close game. I just don't. I think, but now without Deebo Samuel, you're looking at a guy who would probably get 6 carries, 6 to 7. He's going to pick up Deebo. Somebody's going to pick up those carries for Deebo Samuel out of the backfield. I don't think that's going to be Ray McLeod. He's going to be the guy that if he's getting those carries, it's going to be on the jet sweeps and those types of things, or some other receiver will get those. But I can maybe see Jordan Mason getting those carries out of the backfield that were originally would be slated for Deebo. Maybe we see Ty Davis Price finally make his way back onto the field and give them a physical element to the running game that they need. So it'll be an interesting one to see how they move forward with that for sure.
Sounds uncertain to me. Not the time in the fantasy playoffs to be risking something like that. Hopefully I have a better option, my friend.
Well, if you've got Christian McCaffrey, that's the way to go, because
I do in at least one league.
He's put up he's been averaging 113 yards per touch and a touchdown per game over the last 5 weeks, or since I think it's 6 weeks now. Since he started after the Kansas City game, from the Rams game on, that's 6 weeks, he has put up 113 yards per game total and at least one touchdown per game on average. So
it's good stats.
Hey, that's, you come to me, I give you some stats. I'll give you, you want some stats? I got some stats for you. We got a lot of stats as we go through the show tonight too.
Love it.
But you look at this game and I know, Brock Purdy making his first start. I find this whole discussion to be a little interesting. I get the fact that it was his first start, but if we just take a step back for a second, the week before he missed 8 snaps. He played 76 out of 84 snaps the week before against the Miami Dolphins. And so I understand as far as officially it was his first start, but man, what a performance he put on against Tampa Bay, don't you think?
So amazing. And I do think it's worth calling out that idea of going into it, you're the guy. It's a different level of pressure. And I believe that will continue to ratchet up for Brock as he goes forward. Big test, obviously, going into the environment this week, but super impressed that he came out. I do think fortune favored us a little bit, Jack. That hit, and Brock talked about it. He's like, yeah, that was kind of a wake-up call. Football started. It was a reset because it should have been a sack for a big loss. Instead, it's a 15-yard penalty. It starts us with good field position and wakes him up right there. So he had put the team in a poor position. He admits calling the wrong audible. Shanahan calls out the fact, yes, it was the wrong audible. And he pays the price for it, but rebounds right from it. So part of me wants to say, man, if that hadn't gone our way, if that hit had been leveled just a little more correctly, a little lower on him, that would have just been a sack. The game may have started on a different foot. His confidence may have been at a different place, but it didn't. And he responded. He continued to do that throughout the game. Toss that one pick. It was called back again by a penalty. Next play, tosses the touchdown pass to Brandon Ayuk. His ability to stay calm under pressure, in the face of pressure, at the podium, he seems very poised to me, Jack.
Yeah, he's a funny guy, and that play that you're talking about where he gets, the first play of the game, he gets smacked upside the head. I don't know if you saw the post game interview with Kyle Shanahan, not on the field, but in the the media room. But he said something that was low key. It made me chuckle. I don't think didn't seem like very many people maybe caught it, but they were talking about Brock Purdy and the fact that he got smacked, and then it seemed like he got himself into a rhythm and all this kind of stuff. And Kyle Shanahan was saying, yeah, well, he got himself in the wrong play, and then the good part about it was he got us an explosive, and they were able to roll from there. That was, I think, the funniest thing that I heard from, that's one of those things where when it comes to Kyle Shanahan, sometimes his sense of humor, I think, is a little he's got a little bit of dad joke in him. That was definitely a dad joke right there when you talk about your starting quarterback getting you an explosive play off a personal foul when he got hit upside the head. But I just thought that was pretty fantastic. So I had to mention it. I didn't get it into my article today, but it was something that I was thinking about when I was driving into the office this morning. I was like, that was a pretty funny little low key thing right there. But yeah, Brock Purdy, and you look at what he did yesterday going up against, there's just so much talk about Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo and comparing him to those guys, or Nick Mullins was the other one that people keep comparing him to.
Right.
This wasn't the Oakland Raiders circa 2018 that were not a good football team. This isn't even the Houston Texans who were not a very good football team last year. This was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers who, although they were 6-6, came in with a defense that hadn't allowed over, what was it, 18 points, something like that a game was what their average was. They hadn't given up more than 27 points to anybody other than the Kansas City Chiefs. Just a really good defense. And he went out there and hung 28 on them in the first half, 35 in the game, averaged almost 9 yards per pass attempt because they didn't sack him either. Just an amazing performance. And I think the other part too, and that's why I do make it a point to say this is different than Nick Mullins. Nick Mullins, that Monday night game that he played, that he blew out the Raiders, he hadn't thrown a pass in the NFL before that. Nobody knew who he was. Everybody had seen Brock Purdy play almost a whole game the week before. So this wasn't there. There's so many things that are different about these. And he really seems like he has the ability to take it and run with it here for the next 4 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I want to be reserved about this. I don't want to jump too early on the hype train. I want to wait and see it with my own eyes. I am a bit old school, as you mentioned last week, just the same that, hey, I want to see it. I'll prove it to me. Prove it to me. Yeah. Brock, to this point, is absolutely proving it. Now, again, I think there are more steps to that process. He handled adversity at points in both of those games. I want to see what happens when he really gets punched in the mouth. The old Mike Tyson quote, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. I mean, you could argue it happened play one of the game against Tampa. He certainly got punched in the mouth and he responded. But in Seattle, different environment, just the crowd noise, it's hard to describe what it's like to play in Seattle unless you have been there. It just to be in the stands is one thing, let alone on the field. And you see the results of that over the last decade, obviously struggling in that environment. This will be yet another test for me wherein I say to myself, can Brock continue to take those next steps? But after watching what he did against Tampa Bay, I do want to ask you one thing about that, but after watching what he did against Tampa Bay, you have to feel pretty confident going in. The question I have is, what type of a difference do you think it meant to Tampa Bay to lose Vita Vea early in that contest? Honestly, I thought that was going to be one of the toughest challenges for the 49ers in the interior pressure he would have generated. That obviously wasn't the case after the injury.
Yeah, no, it wasn't, and that was a big loss for Tampa Bay. That's a really big one for them, and that definitely, I think, played a role in what the 49ers were able to do in terms of their running ability. I think he was probably in the game though on that one big explosive right off that first possession. Mm-hmm. The big run for McCaffrey and then the run for Samuel. I think it was the second possession when he was out, but
I believe so.
They came out and I think that hurt them. I think not having their starting safeties hurt them. But they've won games and played really well without those guys in the past too. But also they weren't playing against the 49ers. 49ers are just, I think because we watch them every week, we don't understand maybe exactly how good this team really is compared to the rest of the league. There's only a few handful of teams that are able to go out there and do what the 49ers are doing. I don't think there's a team in the league that's able to do what the 49ers are doing with their third string quarterback. But this team overall, we said this thing going back and just go take yourself back to the offseason. And we kept talking about how talented this roster was. And they keep showing it week after week after week. And I agree with you in the point that I think I'm ready to say Brock Purdy's for real. But he's walking into something that only 2 times have the 49ers won in Seattle since 2010.
Right. Alex
Smith on a late game kind of thing, and then the Jimmy Garoppolo game when Dre Greenlaw makes the tackle at the goal line to stop it. Those are the only 2 times the 49ers have won since 2010 up in Seattle. So if he goes up and does that, then there better not be a single person who doubts whether he can get this done or not.
Right. I guess the big piece of the puzzle that remains for me, he got hit a couple of times against Tampa Bay, right? And he comes away with the oblique injury. I'm not saying that there's anything to that, but he hasn't really had a game where he takes significant shots. And he is a little bit of a smaller guy, a little bit of a slighter frame. It's the size metrics that go into him landing where he did in the draft. And obviously the physical intangibles as well. But I just want to see that. I want to see how he responds to that, how he plays once he gets punched in the mouth, quite literally, not figuratively. And the division games always feel like potential matchups where that can happen. A loud environment like Seattle, they're not great against the run, but can get after the passer on occasion. So it'll be interesting to see if that ends up being a test for him.
Oh, it's definitely going to be a test, right? It's going to be a test, and we have some folks already in the comment section, and I said it last night on my show too. The 49ers are a better team than the Seattle Seahawks. We saw it in week 2. They absolutely took it to them. Now Seattle's going to be a little bit different because if Kenneth Walker's healthy, that's something that they didn't really have back in week 2, or they weren't really rolling with him as much. And we're getting way ahead of ourselves and kind of changing the topic here, but I just think that the Seahawks defense is going to be one that if Jimmy Garoppolo could go off the bench without a training camp and like 2.5 weeks into this deal and lead them to what he did, I think it was, 23 points or something like that in that game back in week 2. I feel like Brock Purdy can go out there and get these guys 20 points against Seattle, and the way this defense is playing, it would be enough. So if Brock Purdy goes up and the 49ers win this game with Brock Purdy at quarterback, dealing with an oblique injury and all these other kind of things, I don't think there should be a question as far as where the 49ers are at quarterback moving forward for this season.
Yeah, I said it jokingly, but now that we're on our third stringer, it feels very real. But Kyle Shanahan has amassed the talent on this offense that he could step in and play quarterback. And it kind of feels like Brock Purdy is, I don't know, a sort of a youngish Kyle Shanahan in the mannerisms and the cool factor and the smarts. I see some similarities there. So again, he may not have the physical gifts that you would look for in a first-round draft pick, but within this offense, I think he's a complement to what they're looking for.
I think so too. And for me, the big takeaway from yesterday is I know everybody likes those deep passes, and they were nice. Don't get me wrong; those are nice. Those are sweet. Those 2 deep passes. But for me, the thing that really jumped out was his ability to use his feet. The 49ers have not had a quarterback that can move around and do the things that he did with his feet yesterday for a couple of years. I know he just the touchdown, the blitz, bringing it at him, and he makes a couple guys miss. The boot to his right when he slides up underneath that guy and he makes the throw to Deebo Samuel. That was like a smaller version of 16 doing that. I envision the play where Joe Montana's got a guy coming, he slides up underneath it, and I think he shovels the ball forward to a guy for a touchdown play in a game. Now, I'm not saying Brock Purdy is Joe Montana, but just the ability to move and make plays off of that, and he did it a number of times yesterday. That's why he wasn't sacked. That's right. A big help for his offensive line. He's showing great instincts in the pocket, sliding around, stepping up in the pocket. I agree that his movement back there was very impressive. Yeah, and there's Jack going off the rails again, right? So I better back it up. I'm not saying that Brock Purdy is Joe Montana, so you're not encouraging him to switch his number to 16. Well, here's the thing: if you follow me on Twitter, you saw me yesterday. You know who my guy is because I took that picture of Tom Brady in the end zone and said, here is the second greatest quarterback of all time. Because if you know me, my guy is Joe Montana. If Joe Montana played, this is a discussion for the offseason, but if Joe Montana played in this era of football, he wouldn't have 7 Super Bowls. He probably would have about 8 or 9 because he and Jerry Rice would have torn the NFL apart. But it's a fact. But just a really good game all around. What he is doing right now, meaning Brock Purdy, I owe the guy an apology because I said the 49ers were done if Jimmy Garoppolo got injured. Right now, it might not be. No, it certainly seems as if the Niners are still one of the teams to be feared in the NFL on their third string quarterback. Yeah. And then really quick, there's a comment here from David. He wants to know if I've heard anything about Trey's rehab and his possible return. David, they've consistently shut this down in terms of a return for Trey Lance. He's on injured reserve. Kyle Shanahan has said a number of times that his return this season isn't going to happen. I know there was a report that came out that Jimmy Garoppolo was out for up to 3 months over the weekend. I do find it interesting, though, that he has still not been put on injured reserve. If he is definitely out for the rest of this season and through the playoffs, why would you not put him on injured reserve right now? So remember, they only have 2 more guys that they can bring back. And so all these kind of things work together. And sometimes I really like to listen to what these guys say, and sometimes you have to hear what they say, but then watch what they do as well to really get an idea of what's going on. And I think if one of those two quarterbacks is coming back, it's going to be number 10 and not number 5.
Yeah, especially if they don't put Jimmy on IR in the next week or two, where it does feel like the injuries are piling up for the 49ers and you need all those available roster spots just to make sure that you can dress enough guys for game day. They're keeping Jimmy out there just because of that slim chance that he could make a return. Even if you keep Brock in there, great to have Jimmy as the option to turn to if he's less than 100%, as opposed to having to put a playoff game in the hands of Josh Johnson. Nothing against Josh.
Yeah, nothing against Josh. He actually played okay last year when he played from the numbers standpoint. One thing I want to, other thing I want to say before we get off, and I want to talk about Kyle Shanahan a little bit next, but it was 21-0 when they scored that touchdown to go up 21-0. I tweeted out, "This game is over." And the reason I got a lot of heat on that. What are you talking about? It's Tom Brady. The Buccaneers have barely scored over 20 points in games this season. There was no way, if you're watching that game, unless there was a fluke or a defensive turnover by Brock Purdy that went the other way for a touchdown or a blocked punt or something, there was no way that Tampa Bay was going to get to 21 points in that game. And you could see that in the first half. So I put myself out there a little bit, but you could just see that game was not going to happen for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Tom Brady.
I see interesting body language from Brady, the way in which he talks about it. It's either the fact that he knows he's coming to the end of the journey and he just looks at football a little bit differently. But again, I mean, he even physically looks different. It's just an interesting observation. I'm not sure where I fall with all the speculation of where Brady would go next year, people wanting to link him here. I get kind of the sense that he's soaking this in and this may be his final ride.
Yeah, boy, the 40. I know that he has some guys missing on that offensive line and stuff like that, but Tom Brady looked old yesterday. The 49ers defense looked like he looked old and slow yesterday. I know that he's not fast anyway,
right?
But everything that he was doing seemed like he was a step behind the 49ers yesterday. He came in the game with only 4 interceptions. He had 2. In addition to that, he has Scotty Miller running down the right sideline 10 yards behind Diamond Lenore. And that ball gets broken up because he underthrows it and hits Lenore in the back. Lenore ends up with a pass breakup because the ball hit him in his left shoulder because he just, oh shoot, I got to catch up to that guy. But that pass was so far underthrown. That's why it got broken up. So I wasn't impressed by Tom Brady at all yesterday. And I've heard a number of people say that he's done. I haven't watched enough of him to really get it, but based off what I saw yesterday, let's go ahead and roll with Brock Purdy and Trey Lance in 2023.
I'm with you on that.
Now, real quick, let's change the topic. We did a lot of on the quarterback there, but I do think that we need to give a little bit of a shout out to Kyle Shanahan. I've been hard on Kyle Shanahan going back to when he was first hired, because offensive genius and all those kind of things were the labels that were used for him. And I kept saying, how's this guy an offensive genius? His offense doesn't score points. He doesn't win games. Doesn't have any kind of a history of sustained success. You go back through his career as an offensive coordinator up until now, he had never had back-to-back seasons where his offenses were in the top 16 of the NFL in terms of scoring. He had never had back-to-back winning seasons. Right now, as it stands, he has guaranteed that he is going to have his first back-to-back winning season, because he's 9-4. They can lose the rest of them. They're going to finish up 9-8. So he's going to get it this year. So you got to give him kudos for that. And then the 49ers right now sitting at 8th overall in terms of total points scored, points per game on that statistic. You look at what this 49ers offense is doing, they've scored over 40 points 4 times in a row now. So got to give a shout out to Kyle Shanahan for what he's doing.
You really have to. And he's firmly now into that above 500 territory. And I was reading an article by Tim Kawakami earlier before coming on. I tend to agree with Tim in saying he may never look back. You may never see Kyle Shanahan below that Mendoza line again, that he has hit 500 and he will continue on with his winning ways. I will say if I were playing devil's advocate, and I'm not, I'm a positive guy, but I like to play the other side of it sometimes. If I were playing devil's advocate, I would say to myself, well, an offensive genius shouldn't need all of these weapons around the quarterback in order to produce at this level. Or take the other side of it, that you could put any inept coach at the head of this offense and they would still be able to perform. But I don't believe that's the case. And I do think you have to recognize just how special it is to transition from Trey to Jimmy to Brock and sustain production throughout that. I always take my hat off to Kyle Shanahan because there have been some off seasons. I've always looked at it like a high performance Italian sports car. It doesn't run all the time, right? Sometimes it's in the shop. Sometimes it needs to go in for service. That's what our offense feels like. Every other year up until these past two, you had a blown engine, a valve that had floated that you needed to go in for repairs. But when it's running, you see it firing on all cylinders. It's a beautiful thing to behold. And now he's been able to maintain a little bit more consistency these past two seasons. I've always believed in Kyle Shanahan. I'm hoping that this will prove some of his doubters wrong.
Yeah, for me, when it comes to Kyle Shanahan, I had a lot of doubt until last year. Last year was the year that turned me around. Was watching what he did going from 3-5. When I still remember when they lost that game and they went to 3-5. I think it was against the Cardinals, right? Got them to 3-5. I believe
so.
And I remember getting up. Yeah, I remember getting up in the press box to go downstairs saying out loud to the person standing next to me, they're done. The 49ers this season is over with for the 49ers. And he just was able to put something together, and they were all the way to a couple of plays, an interception here, a better throw there from being in the Super Bowl, beating the Rams and being in the Super Bowl last year. And here they come back this year at 9-4. They're proving what I said about that 2020 team, where even with all the injuries in 2020, I thought that was a playoff team if they just had a quarterback that didn't screw it up along the way like what they had. And you're seeing that. You had what Jimmy Garoppolo did coming off the bench in place of Trey Lance. And now you've got a couple of back-to-back wins with Brock Purdy playing quarterback and just not screwing it up, and how much talent this team has and how he's able to manage it. I think he just deserves a lot of applause for that.
Absolutely. I mean, I heard people throwing it about. You have someone winning consistently with their second and third string quarterbacks, that his name should be in the conversation for coach of the year. And I believe that's the case.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And then real quick, I got a super chat here from Blind Tom. Thank you very much, Tom. Tom is also a member of the Toolbox. It says another commentator has said Purdy has had a noodle arm. I sure didn't see that. How about you two guys? I know where this comment stems from. I was at the practice field that day when he underthrew a pass during, I think it was rookie minicamp. Does Brock Purdy have a noodle arm? No, I've been saying for a couple of weeks now, going back to when he took over last week, that he has an arm just as strong, if not strong. I think it's stronger than Jimmy Garoppolo. That's what I've actually been saying, is that his arm's stronger than Jimmy Garoppolo, and I really believe that, watching the two throw next to each other. So, no, I don't think so. And I think partly to understand like where the comment comes from is the 49 training facility. The wind a lot of times blows out of the south, and so it's blowing blowing north. And so, like, think of like where San Jose Airport is and where San Francisco Airport is, on opposite ends. And so usually the wind will come from the airport north, right? I guess that's a northerly wind. I don't know. I'm not into that stuff.
I'll take your word for it.
I'll have to ask my kid. But anyway, that's usually the direction that the wind blows, and the 49ers were going in the opposite direction. He tried to throw a deep ball down the middle, and it got hung up. And I remember saying the same thing, like, "Ooh, that was an ugly pass." But having been out on the practice field enough, I understand kind of the way that when they're going the other direction, the wind's usually going with them. It's the same thing in the stadium as well most of the time. So I think that's where it comes from. It comes from one throw, and he doesn't have a noodle arm. He's got enough arm to make every throw the 49ers ask.
No, and I know for sure that this was said on a program on my channel as well, I think in a joking fashion, but also as a serious criticism, and I chuckled along with it. I viewed it as, okay, well, it's not necessarily a huge liability, but if you were listing his strengths and his potential weaknesses, arm strength, would not be listed on the side of strengths. But in asking people who have seen it in person and in trusting the eyes of people who I know to be good talent evaluators like Jack, I absolutely have to fall on the side of believing what I've seen with my two own eyes and those that have seen it in person at practice, that's not the case. It is not a limiting factor that's going to prevent him from being successful.
No, it's not. He's got enough arm to make all the throws. Look at the throw that he made to Deebo Samuel yesterday on the play we were talking about earlier, where he's moving, he's stopping his feet, running, making that throw. And basically, he threw a dart on the move there to Samuel on that one nice gain. He's got plenty of arm to make the throws. So the touchdown throw to Christian McCaffrey, that throw reminds me of the Jimmy Garoppolo throw from week 2 to Brandon Ayuk. The only difference is that Ayuk couldn't adjust and catch the ball. It was, if you watch the two plays back to back, like on top of each other, the ball placement is so similar and everything about it, except for one guy's able to make the play and the other doesn't. So, interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And quite honestly, there are a lot of throws out there where not throwing a laser in there is advantageous if you can anticipate the throw and get it there on time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the thing, and that's where he struggled a little bit in his first start. He was a little bit better yesterday at it. There was some really nice balls from Brock Purdy, but I think we need to move off the offense a little bit. We've got to get to the defense side here before we wrap the show up, because it wasn't just an offensive performance yesterday. No. This 49ers defense has just been, like I said, I when it was 21-0 midway through the second quarter, I was able to say it was over with because the defense wasn't going to give up that many points. You look at what the 49ers defense has done. They have held opponents to 17 points or less 6 games in a row. The 49ers have not done that since 1992. That 1992 defense getting all the way to the NFC Championship game before an unfortunate ending against the Cowboys at Candlestick Park that season. In addition to the points, the 49ers defense has 12 takeaways in the last 5 games. So since the bye week, they've taken the ball away 12 times. Amazing stuff there. And then one more thing when it comes to takeaways. They had 2 picks yesterday for Brady. And this is the first time since 2015 that they've had 2 interceptions in back-to-back weeks. So this defense is playing at such a high level. It's just really fun to watch.
It really is. I mean, it's a spectacular defense that's flying around the field. And I would argue that I saw this pass rush as being elite prior to the season, and I still believe that to be the case. Obviously, Nick Bosa should have gotten the phantom sack that was taken away. I saw a picture today on Twitter that Matt Barrows put out there that clearly showed Brady's knee down and fingertips still touching that ball. I wish they had reviewed that so that Bosa could have had a sack in every full game that he has played this season. Brutal that they didn't give him that one. Sorry, Jack. I thought you were going to chime in on that. You look like you were ready and raring to come in.
No, you're right. I mean, he was right there. That was the first third down, like 3rd and long of the game, and it just showed exactly how that flow was going to go. They got him into 3rd and long. He had moved the ball down with some short plays, and then they finally got him backed up on 3rd and long, and they were able to heat him up and force the ball, to be thrown away. I thought it was a sack. If nothing else, it was, he was in the grasp, which they don't call anymore, but it seemed like he was going to be down. It was a close one for sure.
It really was. And so while I don't think we have racked up, other than Bosa continuing to get the sack totals, we have not gotten the sacks that I anticipated this season. And yet I still believe it is our ferocious pass rush that is altering the way in which offenses play us, that you have teams focused on getting the ball out quick. And Brady has always been a guy that's about the quick release. But other teams take that approach as well. And we have just been super short tacklers, keeping everything in front of us, minimizing the number of game-changing plays that get behind the defense. Just playing intelligent defense, getting after the quarterback, maybe not getting his home as frequently as I might like, but I do believe there is a correlation between the pressure we're generating and the number of turnovers that we've been able to generate.
No, there's definitely those two things go hand in hand. Hitting the quarterback, making quarterbacks move around, those types of things generally are going to lead to turnovers. They're going to lead. There's not a position in the game of football that fumbles the ball more than quarterbacks because of the way that they get hit in the pocket and the fact that the ball is usually not tucked in. So quarterbacks are going to fumble the ball more than any other position on the field. And so that's one of the things that you get there. You also get the balls like we've seen. Jimmy Ward, we're going to talk about him in a second. Now, he's got a couple of interceptions this season. Tayshaun Gibson, we're going to talk about him and Talanoa Hufanga as well. And those two, are getting the ball taken away. And even like what Dre Greenlaw did yesterday. So they're definitely getting turnovers because of what that front is doing. I think it's really helping them out.
Absolutely. And the defense is just playing as a unit. They seem to be communicating well. That's always something that I look at pre-snap, because I used to watch a fair amount of the HBO Sports NFL Live version that they did late at night that would have Ray Lewis on there. And as a phenomenal defender, a part of one of the best defenses to ever bless the NFL field out there, he would constantly talk about the need for the back end of the defense to be in constant communication, and generally would point out when you see a defense in flux, one that's struggling, you see guys communicating, bickering, and it doesn't look like cohesive conversation back and forth. When I watch the Niners, whether it's Huff or Gibson, or Fred Warner, everyone's talking, and you can get a sense that they all are on the same page. And then the end result is that they seem to have fewer of those blown coverages. They seem to keep things in front of them. They seem to be able to tackle, get after the quarterback. Everything comes together.
Yeah, we talked about Eric Armstead and his return and what he's been doing. And yesterday in the second half, they were up so big. They actually went into a possession. I noted it on my Twitter thing, but they came out and went down the second team defense started off with possession and basically were out there for quite a while. And then they brought the starters in after they'd kind of got a good rest. They gave them a long period off, and then they brought the starting defensive line back on the field. But it wasn't like that backup unit was even, they were still heating up Brady and getting into his face and slowing him down. And they're really making Tampa Bay crawl down the field. So they just have so much depth. And you look at it, and that front is really good. That linebacker level is really good. And then you get into the secondary. Things are a little bit of a mix and match back there, but even those guys are playing at such a high level. I think that front seven really helps them out.
Do you get concerned on the defensive side of the ball for that accumulation of injuries at the single positions? Do you grow concerned at our depth being tested there at cornerback, or some of our starting bodies there on the interior defensive line?
Yeah, and that brings up a really good question, because I know somebody was just asking me that over here in the comment section. It was Luke Walsh, and he said, Jack, I'll pull it up really quick because it leads into what you just asked me. Thoughts on, hold on a second. My machine's running a little slow on my end, so everything's a little behind. I'm sorry. It says, Jack, thoughts on cornerback and defensive tackle depth on Thursday night? Well, I think when you look at it, for the most part, I think they're going to be okay. Their starters are all healthy. The backups are where they got a little dinged up, and definitely safety is going to be an issue for them, because they don't all their safety guys they have George Odom's the only guy that's healthy. That's not a starter right now. So I'm looking at their depth chart, and the practice squad has Quantrez Knight that can come up, and Quantrez Knight is a guy who worked out at safety with the 49ers during the training portion. So maybe he's a guy that comes off the practice squad for a game to give him some depth and play some special teams for him. They have the injury to Thomas as well, but they have Janoris Jenkins, who's a cornerback who's on the practice squad, a veteran. They're getting to that time of the year anyway. We might as well bring him up and get him out there if you can. In terms of the defensive line, I think they still have Akeem Spence available to them. They brought in a guy today from the Houston Texans. I was just looking at that a minute ago, by the name of Michael Dwumfor, who is a former University of Michigan Go Blue. Get yourself to the national championship game for Jim Harbaugh. But
let's go Harbaugh.
Dwumfor is a guy who he played 7 games this year for Houston. He just played yesterday actually for him against Cleveland. So they were able to get him off of the practice squad over there, add him to their squad here. So I think you look at it, and there's depth, and that's one of the things. You look at the 49ers roster, and I talked about this. It's been a long time since I've talked about it, but you have your 53-man active roster, but in addition to that 53-man roster, you have another 15, 16 guys, 16, 17 that they can carry because of Alfredo Gutierrez.
Right.
You have that practice squad, and those practice squad guys you can pull up and go back and forth, and they can play 3 games without having to be added to your roster full time. So they can elevate those guys. So there's guys there that they can do that with. So Jenkins would be one, Quantrez Knight would be another, just kind of looking through it in terms of the backfield. Taylor Hawkins is another safety. So they've got some guys that have been with them throughout training camp all season long that could step in and help out on the back end at safety where Dante Johnson was. Obviously, you'd rather have Dante back there as an emergency guy, but that's not going to happen. So, but they have guys, and that's a long-winded answer to say, when you look at the 49ers depth chart, you can't just look at the active roster. You need to look at their the full roster, including their practice squad, because they have a number of veterans that they've got on that practice squad for a reason. It's because they expect to use those guys to play games for them.
And I think there are 2 critical takeaways for me from what you had there, which is that the majority of the injuries are to role players, contributors. So filling in for those can be easier. Finding a replacement that is a suitable replacement can be easier. And I take away the fact that the 49ers have some of those veterans who are going to sit on someone's practice squad that chose the 49ers because of how special this team is, right? There are 3 teams, as I see it, 2 really elite ones within the NFC, and then I put the Cowboys in there. I've got the Vikings as more of pretenders in my book. But when you see these free agents and guys choosing practice squads, they tend to matriculate to those teams they feel have a chance to get them a ring, because practice squad guys most often get that ring as well. Organizations tend to take care of them. And you never know if you're going to get yourself elevated like Janoris Jenkins or Quantrez Knight would seemingly get elevated in this game. My guess would be they'd probably elevate 1 defensive lineman and 1 cornerback.
Yeah, I think you're going to see that. That's going to come up coming up. So we'll see how it works out. I think it's going to work out just fine for them. They don't have Darquez Dennard on the roster at all right now, Black 59 Razors, so that's not going to happen. And they don't have a need at nickel corner, which is what Darquez Dennard did for him last year. They just don't have that need there yet. So I think they're going to be fine. Like you actually did a better job than I did, Rob, in pointing out that most of those guys are role players. That's a much faster way than what I said.
No, but I only got there because of your verbose answer, Jack. That's why we're a good team.
Basically telling me I'm full of hot air. Thank you. I appreciate it. But real quick, too, before we go, there's 2 other things that I want to shout out. I want to shout out the safety positions. I want to shout out Jimmy Ward, because Jimmy Ward's a guy that I gave a lot of grief to early on when he first came back. He struggled when he first came back from that injury playing at the slot position, but he's really been able to come on. You look at what he's done since the bye week. He has 20 tackles, solo tackles. He has 2 picks. He has 4 passes defense, and he's forced a fumble. So he's played really well in the slot. And then on top of that, really quick, I want to talk about the reason why he's playing in the slot, and that's because Tayshaun Gibson and Talanoa Hufanga are such a good safety tandem on the back end. Their level of play is why the 49ers felt comfortable with sliding Jimmy Ward down inside instead of keeping him on the back end. And you look at Gibson with the interception yesterday. Gibson and Talanoa Hufanga, they have 6 interceptions this season. That's the most by a 49ers secondary tandem since 2014 when Antoine Bethea and Eric Reed combined for 7. So they're picking the ball off on the back end, and that's why you're seeing Jimmy Ward play it in the slot. But those 3 guys, when you look at it, they're all really working good together.
It really is. Congratulations to Jimmy Ward for seeming to really embrace the role that was thrown his way. And he has absolutely played with his hair on fire. He was just all around the ball. The energy that he's been bringing when he was stonewalled by Fournette and continued on towards Brady in the blitz, even though he was clearly injured, because after the play, he was then down. That just showed a level of intensity from Jimmy Ward. And I was skeptical, too, when he first came back, because I got the sense that he didn't want to do what was being asked of him. Whatever the case may be, whether he was a little bit put off by not getting his original position back, or not, he has at this point fully embraced the role, and the Niners clearly managed to get the best 11 guys back on the field.
Yeah, that's the thing. They got the best 11 guys out there, and I was with you. I kind of jumped the gun a little bit there because some of the things he said before the Rams game about,
Right?
doing what he needs to do and all those kind of things, but not really being happy about it. I kind of jumped the gun there a little bit too, and that's kind of why I wanted to make sure that I put that out there, because he has done well. I said some negative things about him, but if you're going to say negative things about these guys, you need to make sure that you're showing the other side when they do well, like he's done. You want to make sure that you're pointing out that side of it as well. So I just wanted to make sure that I got out there for Jimmy Ward.
Yes, absolutely. All sorts of praise for Jimmy Ward.
Now, real quick, was there anything else that jumped out at you from the game yesterday that we haven't already covered?
I mean, I will take the other name that you had out there that I've got to admit a little bit. When we did the preemptive signing for Dre Greenlaw, I thought, oh man, we're really spending a bunch of money at the linebacker position. Doesn't feel like that's prudent as far as roster building goes. Why sign him early in the season? Well, let me just shut up at this point, because it was the exact right time to sign Dre Greenlaw before he continued to prove that he was worth more than the 49ers signed him for. And it is the linebacking core that makes this defense so cohesive, that ties the two levels together. I mean, finally, the Niners have a legit number one cornerback, and that was a puzzle piece that was missing. But to have the elite defensive line, the linebacking crew that can cover sideline to sideline, that are tackling machines. I mean, Greenlaw with the 15 tackles in the last game, just an enormous amount of credit for Dre Greenlaw, and to John Lynch for seeing ahead and signing Dre Greenlaw to that extension.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect spot to end right there, is on the Dre Greenlaw thing, because that was, not only did he make a fantastic play jumping up, batting the ball to himself and coming down with the interception, but the intestinal fortitude that it takes to walk up to that quarterback that you intercepted the ball from after the game and saying, "Can I please have your autograph on this ball that I picked off from you?" That was pretty fantastic.
Yeah, 100%. And I love how both he and Fred were like, yeah, I walked up to him like a little 5-year-old fan, and I don't care about it because he's the greatest. Like, that idea of them being like, yeah, we're fans too. Like, on some level, we have commonality with the fans that are out there, the faithful that are watching them. And I always, when you have a humanizing moment like that, I always appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing, is like, you look at it, and Tom Brady. That's the thing. Tom Brady's been in the NFL so long. The guy that he was on the other side playing quarterback for the 49ers, I think he wasn't even born yet when Tom Brady started off with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's how old that guy is. He's older. He's almost as old as me. That's how old he is. We have a couple of super chats real quick to round this off. And we have first, Sean 9519ers. Thank you. He says, since you were Samsonite way off yesterday, you're making fun of my prediction because I was so bad on that. He says, what's your prediction this week? No Deebo, assume Purdy plays. 49ers 42-10. This is a Purdy true test, or this is Purdy true test. I think he's trying to say it's Purdy's true test. I'm going to say 49ers. I'm going to go back to the number that I've been kind of hanging around most of the year. I'm going to say 49ers 23, Seahawks 16.
I mean, it's going to sound like I just went off of yours, but I had 24-17 in my head going into this. So that I'm about there. Again, if Sean is right about this and putting up the 42, I mean, we might just have to take a 10-minute timeout and celebrate his rightness for that one on one of our shows.
Hey, if it's 42-10, Sean, I'd love you, because yesterday that was one of the things, is that game was a little bit later starting game, and I was able to leave the stadium a little bit earlier because that game was so bad. I was able to get most of my write-up done before the game was over with. So if it can be 42-10 for a Thursday night game, it allows me to get back to my hotel before midnight. I'll give you a high five and give you your $5 back, maybe. Probably not. But, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And then last but not least, we have Daryl Granville comes in, and he says, great show, guys. Does Seattle have any injuries? They do. Let me get back to my report for that really quick, and I'll tell you what their injuries are, because they do have a few injuries, and let me get to it.
The big question mark will be who returns for them at running back, because we just missed a game wherein they were depleted.
Well, I know that they're expected to have Kenneth Walker back. So
Right.
Kenneth Walker is their big back. He's the guy who was really the guy that led them through. So
he's carried a couple of my fantasy teams.
Yeah, he was listed today as limited. Would have been a limited participant. So I expect
trending towards playing.
Yeah, I would expect that we're going to see Kenneth Walker on Thursday night. That's going to be a big piece of that game. Other injuries: DJ Dallas, Shelby Harris, that's defensive end, safety Ryan Neal, defensive tackle Al Woods with an Achilles. Those guys were listed as not participating today. And then the other limited, along with Walker, was safety Joey Blunt, and then Will Dissly and DK Metcalf are both would have been full participants. So they have some injuries, but they don't have as many as the 49ers. But even with all the injuries, I think the 49ers, the 49ers core is stronger than the Seahawks.
It's a better team overall. I agree with that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Daryl, for that super chat. And I want to shout out everybody. Rob, there's been somebody who keeps asking if you're doing a show tonight. What's going on your channel?
And I keep meaning to respond in one of my answers and just forgetting. No live stream tonight. I will be looking to try and get one in tomorrow, but most likely the first stream of the week will be Between Two Beards on Wednesday night, and then we'll obviously have the game on Thursday night.
And I heard a rumor. I think you're going to be in the Pacific. Well, you're already in the Pacific Northwest.
I am in the Pacific Northwest.
The northern part of the Pacific Northwest.
I was 1,000% going to be at the game. It's now looking like I have a meeting that afternoon on my calendar for a critical project I'm involved in that happens to be just a little too late to hit the road after. So I'm hoping that meeting gets pushed, moved, canceled, and then I will be there. But there's a chance I may not. And I know there are some fans that will breathe a sigh of relief if that's the case anyway.
I actually had somebody ask me that the other day. So
son of a
I didn't want to say it. I'm glad that you went there yourself.
Yeah, so. I've gotten over that a little bit. For a while I was taking that personal. When we were real close to those losses, it was harder to laugh about it. Now in hindsight, much easier to laugh about it.
Yeah, I think it might have even been our friend Lucas from Austria. I ran into him at the game yesterday. He was actually in the press box with his dad. They were sitting literally about 6 seats to my left.
Oh wow.
Which was awesome. They were there with an Austrian television group. So awesome. That was fantastic. And I think it was him. I think what he asked me was if you were going to the game or not, because if you were going, that meant he'd have to watch so that he could counteract it. And if you weren't going, he'd be able to sleep through the night. I think that was kind of what he was saying to me.
I love that he could counterbalance it. Lucas, we may need to powwow about this and coordinate for the future, because I will be there in Las Vegas and we can't be losing to the Raiders.
That's right. Yeah. Well, yeah, that cannot happen. You're going to be in Vegas. That's going to be an interesting one in itself. So, no, that's awesome, man. And so make sure if you're watching this thing, make sure you get over to Rob's channel. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like his content. Get over there and pay attention to what's happening. When you subscribe, make sure you hit the little bell notification. That's the biggest thing. So that way, when Rob goes live, you don't miss it. When I go live, you don't miss it. So, Rob, thanks for joining me. Always appreciate it. It's always a lot of fun.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
And everybody else watching, thank you for tuning in and listening to us cut this up. And make sure you hit that like button on your way out, because those likes are the biggest thing that you can do for us. And then also hit that subscribe button. And if you know somebody that's a Fournier fan that isn't subscribed to it, make sure they know about this channel too, so they can come on and listen to us talk about the game and all the other stuff. I'll be back tomorrow with my film breakdown, Hammer and Nails in the evening, and then I'll be taking Wednesday off before the big game as well. So, Rob, again, thank you. Thanks, everybody over there. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and we'll talk to y'all soon. There's the cheers from Rob. Don't ever forget that one.